all the muscles that contract and dilate.
Shut up.
Come on.
You're just mad because I finally answered one.
Change diameter of pupil to control the amount of light entering the eye.
Okay, have you been reading the whole time?
No,
No,
she
no,
just
no,
now
no.
read that one.
Okay. Okay, so yes, that's I think we ended off there. And the fovea centralis, the fovea centralis.
It's a little much.
Oh, that is where the picture lies upon that you're looking at. The focus point that you're looking at.
Good.
Oh, your hello son.
I think we did go over the
We started. We left off right there.
Yeah.
okay, the rising cones, right. So the rising cones are the photoreceptors. So they're found in what part of the eye? I remember that now. The retina. So the retina is where the rising cones are, and you should know the difference between the rising cones. They're both photoreceptors, but they have a different job. So the function of rods is to provide vision in dim light, and it allows us to see shades of gray when the lights are off. And the cones provide light and color vision. And the cones are densely clustered in the fovea centralis. Remember, the fovea centralis gives us high visual clarity or acuity, and that's because of the high concentration of cones in that part of the eye, that part of the retina. And the structure of the retina, so this picture is a picture of the retina. So you can see several layers of cells. So as light comes through the back of the eyes, the light is going up in the picture. So this back row, called the pigmented part of the retina. And then you have the stimulation from there of the receptors here, the rods and cones. And notice the difference between the rods and cones. The rods are reddish, it's brown colored. And the cones are bluish purple. But the shape of that superior portion is why they're called rods and cones. Okay, so those receptors are activated, and then they transmit the signal. It has to get to the occipital lobe. So the pathway, I do think I asked you the pathway there. Not in the retina, but the receptors send the signal forward through the horizontal cells, bipolar cells, Hammerman cells, and ganglion cells. And the axons of those ganglion cells are what make up the optic nerve. Okay, so the axons, you can see of the ganglion cells there, are traveling toward the optic nerve. So those fibers come on out through the back of the eyeball by way of the optic nerve, and then they go through the optic chiasm and then the optic tract. And what did we say about the blind spot?
We said something about that, but I don't know.
There, I did find a picture in your book, and you can actually test the presence of your blind spot. You look at a little X mark, find that. If you all have your book.
What week was that slide? I didn't know you.
Yeah, I know it's like this. She can't fit in.
I didn't know if it said it on your slide or not. 17 is the way she's on, but I. Oh,
Oh, page
Her
5,
shirt.
my shirt. Y'all have your book? I'm sorry, I came unprepared.
561. You look at that the plus sign, just stare at it. I think you cover your left eye, one of your eyes. It tells you what to do. And if you are a certain distance from the book, while you're staring at that plus sign, the other black dot will disappear. And that's because it falls on your blind spot. But you have to find the distance In fact, if you are looking at the black spot, the black X, or the plus sign, and you can see the black dot next to it, if you pull it away slowly, it'll disappear. So I may have you all do that for lab this week, actually. Okay, so the fovea centralis, again, provides high visual acuity. And you have the chambers of the eye. The lens, we talked about the function. And the lens, what did we say about the lens? What is the function of the lens? Right, so it focuses. It's the focusing part of the eye. Trying to make sure the image that we're looking at falls on the retina at the proper point on the retina. And cataracts, you've heard of cataracts. And cataracts involves the lens becoming cloudy. Okay, so when the lens becomes cloudy, and you can see this. Have you all ever seen someone with cataracts? When you look at their eye, yeah. So the pupils kind of look cloudy. Is what it appears as, and that's because the lens has become cloudy.
Why does that happen?
It's just a buildup.
Of calcium?
Yeah, some little crystals build up in the lens. A little bit more about the function of the lens. So you'll see refraction, light refraction. So the word refraction just means bending of light. So when light passes through glass or most substances, the light bends as it goes through. And that's what happens with our eye. So we have our cornea, for one, reflects light. But the focal point is the specific point of intersection of the light on the retina. And then the focal distance is the distance between the center of the lens and that focal point on the retina. Accommodation, I do ask you to know about accommodation, is the shaping of the lens depending on how close an object is that you're looking at. So we'll see the difference between looking at something at a distance and close up and how the lens reacts to those two situations. And astigmatism is a condition where light passing through the cornea and lens is not refracted properly. So again, refraction is just the bending of the light when it passes through the cornea, the aqueous humor, and the lens. And so and that's basically what you see here. So when the light hits the cornea, there's a slight bending, although you don't see much of it. But that bends the light, and then when the light goes through the lens, it bends even more. And that bending of the light is called refraction. So notice the difference here. So accommodation, we said that has to do with how the lens changes its shape in order to allow the image to fall on the retina. And so the lens has to change shape in order for that to happen. So while we're looking at an object close to our face, you can see the lens becomes more rounded. So compare the lens shape here to the lens shape here. So the lens becomes more rounded when you're looking at something close to you. And that allows the light to bend in such a way that the image falls right there on the fovea centralis. Whereas if you're looking at something at a distance, like at the back of the classroom, your lens is going to flatten out. And that is going to allow the image to fall on the retina at the proper point. So that is accommodation. Another point is, and it should be obvious to you if you're looking straight ahead at someone, you can see the ceiling, right? While you're looking straight ahead. So the light from the ceiling, the reason you can actually see it is because the light is hitting some part of your retina. But what part of the retina is the light from the ceiling hitting and that's going to be the lower part of your retina. Whereas if you're looking straight ahead, you can see the floor, so the light from the floor is going up to the superior part of the retina. So in other words, when we look at an image, by the time it hits our retina, it's inverted on our retina. Okay? Sort of like that. So the top of it ends up being on the bottom of the retina, and the bottom of the object or image falls on the superior part of the retina.
So it's just
Basically, yeah. Okay?
So, with, people with dyslexia sometimes, their brain not ever switch it back around?
I don't think that has, but I'm not exactly sure. I can see why you would ask that. Because it's the interpretation of,
Then they say everything
thing.
backwards there.
right. But for some reason, I don't think it has to do with this aspect. No. Right. Because then they would kind of see the whole world mixed
Kind
up.
of crazy.
But what I do remember seeing is an experiment where some people who do research on eyes rotated the eyeballs of frogs. And really what happens is, like I said, the image that falls on the retina is actually upside down. So at first, those frogs were disoriented. They didn't know up from down, obviously, but after a while, they became adapted to it. And what happens is, even though the image is on our retina upside down, by the time it gets to the brain flips it back over. So that's what they're saying happened in that study, is initially the signal going to the brain of the frogs, right, was mixed up, and then somehow the brain just adapted to it and had things turn right back around.
How will they tell the difference? I mean, how would you
That's
know?
my question. I'm sure they had some way of doing it, because you would think, well, maybe they just got used to things being upside down,
Maybe
but
like
that doesn't mean they see it
frogs.
that way. Right. Exactly. But that's what the brain does. It flips everything back up for us. And then for the blind spot, I think I told you that the brain fills it in, so you don't see a black spot on the in your visual field. Okay, so the difference between nearsightedness and farsightedness. First, know that nearsightedness is myopia, and farsightedness is hyperopia. So what's the difference? If a person is myopic, that means what? They're nearsighted, which means what?
You see things better up close.
Right. So they can see things better when they're close to their face. Objects close to the face are easier to see. And the reason for myopia is that the image or focal point is not landing on the fovea centralis. So the clearest image, we want it to fall, the focal point to fall on the fovea centralis, but it's not. It's falling in front of the fovea centralis. And the reason that happens is because the eyeball is too long. Okay, so you can see the eyeball is long. If you compare that picture to this one, you can see the difference. So in farsightedness, the eyeball is what? Too short. Okay, so that means the perfect image is falling behind. The focal point is actually falling behind the retina. So whatever image goes through the retina is not going to be very clear. So that's the difference between those two. Okay, long eyeball, myopia, image not falling or falling in front of the retina, whereas hyperopia, the image falls behind the retina. And as we get older, we become farsighted. You may notice older people reading the newspaper, pull it away from their face. So that is what happens the older we get. Older people become farsighted as their lenses lose elasticity. So that could be somebody who had perfect 20/20 vision at some point, but then when they get older, their eyeball isn't changing shape. The problem is the lens, which is supposed to bend the light onto the retina, loses its elasticity, so the image is not falling where it's supposed to. And that is called presbyopia, the farsightedness that we see in older people. All right.
I understand why somebody could easily go blind. There's a lot to it.
Oh,
Mess
yeah.
up one
Oh,
thing.
yeah, everything has to kind of work perfectly. So you also have different types of lenses to treat
What's a
myopia. And astigmatism, okay. So what happens with an astigmatism? So you can see here, whenever the perfect image doesn't follow the focus centralis, then you have blurred vision somewhat, not extremely. I mean, we kind of get used to it after a while. But if the image is not falling dead center in the focus centralis, then the image that does pass through the focus centralis is distorted in some way. With astigmatism, the shape of the cornea or even the shape of the lens is not perfectly spherical. So the cornea is supposed to be spherical like a basketball, but a person who has,
Like a football.
right, so the cornea in a person who has an astigmatism may be more shaped like a football. So instead of having this one focal point, there may be two focal points. Okay, so the two focal points distorts the image. And so when the signal makes it to the brain, it's not a clear picture, is what's going on. And I think
I have that.
astigmatism, yes, so do I.
It's bad.
Yeah. And mine has gotten worse over the years. Yeah, so astigmatism condition where light passing through the cornea and lens is not refracted properly. And usually it has two focal points instead of just one. All right.
Isn't that what they fix a lot of times with laser surgery?
Hmm?
Don't they fix that sometimes with laser
Mhm.
surgery?
Yep, that's what LASIK helps to restore the shape of the cornea.
Mine, yeah, I think mine's got some problems. They just run out of words. They just started going on with Latin.
All right, and so color vision involves the integration of information from three types of cones. We have red cones, green cones, and blue cones. So if we lack any of those, then we are colorblind. So that is going to involve an inability to detect certain colors depending on which of those cones you lack. This is a test. So everyone sees the number there?
Yep.
So if you didn't, what would it tell you?
You're colorblind.
You're colorblind because you're lacking red cones. Okay. Depth perception is obtained by comparing relative position of objects between the left and right eye. So I think I asked you on your study hints, what is required for depth perception? So do you all know what depth perception means anyway? First. Right. Right. So your ability to judge how far something is away from you or how close. So with your two eyes, you can tell that I'm not close enough to you to touch you, right? I have to walk a little closer to touch you. If you didn't have depth perception, you may think you could reach out and touch me from where you are. And that would be the case if you only had one eye.
Kind of like a 3D movie.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell how far.
So you need two eyes in order to judge how close something is to you. And if you just have one eye that works, then you're going to have trouble with depth perception. I had a student a couple years ago. He said his 16-year-old son lost an eye playing with fireworks. And he said every now and then he'll toss a ball to him. And his son will be like, He doesn't, he doesn't know when the ball is going to get there. So he said it makes sense now. So he has lost his depth perception. Yeah, I thought that was pretty mean too.
My grandma was a paintball.
Something else on here. The consensual reflex, and you all are going to do a lab assignment on this, but it's on your study hints as well. Did you all look up consensual reflex? Huh? No, I don't want you to look it up. I want to know if you all had already. It's one of your study hints, I believe.
Look at what?
Consensual reflex. Photopupillary reflex. Photopupillary reflex. And that's where if your pupils dilate or constrict, both of them are doing it. Even if what happens when the doctor shines a light into one of your eyes? It constricts, right? Why does it constrict?
It's trying to remember light.
Right. Trying to reduce the amount of light coming in.
That is a rod.
Exactly.
Dang.
What's a rod?
The rod dims the light.
No, the pupil just decreases the amount of light getting back to the retina altogether. That's the iris doing that, constricting the pupil. But if they shine a light on one eye, both eyes constrict, and that's the consensual reflex. So when one eye constricts, the other one does too, unless there's some neurological issue, and that's what the doctors are checking for, to make sure that one, that the pupils are going to constrict, and that two, both of them constrict when you shine the light on one eye. Okay, and finally, just a few things here. There's quite a bit on the ear, but I don't ask too much on the test about the ear. Functionally, most importantly, I'll ask you the function of the cochlea, the vestibule, and the auditory tube. The cochlea, the vestibule, vestibular apparatus, and the auditory tube, also called eustachian tube. So the cochlea is the organ of hearing. So that's where the receptors for hearing are located, in the cochlea. And the vestibule is the organ for equilibrium. And what is equilibrium? Balance. So it provides balance. So if you have an issue with your vestibule, what do you think the result would be? Huh?
Be off balance.
Right, such as, can you think of a condition? Vertigo. Right. Dizziness. Where the wrong spin. Dizzy. Have you ever been on the sit and spin?
Like passing out.
Just imagine, and I used to hate that. The sit and spin. I just like it. I don't know. I just hate to feel dizzy. Even at theme parks, I'd rather go on roller coasters going up and down, but spinning, this makes me sick. So that's kind of the feeling. If there's, sometimes you can have an ear infection and have that dizziness.
High blood pressure.
Or high blood pressure. Okay, and then the auditory tube. Have you ever been on an airplane and your ears pop? That is because of this area here. The auditory tube, and the job of the auditory tube is to equalize pressure on both sides of the eardrum. So the eardrum is susceptible to differences in pressure. If the pressure is different on one side or the other, that's what the popping of the ears is.
You get one of the highways.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a difference in the pressure, atmospheric pressure out here, and the pressure in your inner ear. So equalizes pressure on both sides. The eardrum, obviously, so when you hear a sound, sounds travel in waves. So when those sound waves hit the eardrum what?
Vibrates.
It vibrates. There you go. And it vibrates these ossicles. And the signal makes it in and travels along the path of the cochlea. And I won't go into all that. It's very detailed. And we'll do you some good to go over this.
At some point or before the test?
Okay, so the vestibular nerve,
Wait.
the vestibular nerve versus the cochlear nerve. What do you think they do? Vestibulocochlear. What about the vestibulocochlear nerve? Because you all do know the cranial nerves and their functions, right? What's the function of the vestibulocochlear nerve?
Oh, I don't know. I
Maybe they
know.
look at a sheet.
It's underneath facial, but I mean, that's not
What I
all I
do,
can
what
see.
about you see?
Corley knows the function of the vestibulocochlear nerve. Hearing and equilibrium. Right. So if you don't have those nerves, the signal can't get from the vestibule and cochlea onto the what? The parts of the brain. So remember, all sensory information starts at receptors. Those receptors are there, but they go to what?
The nerve.
The CNS. Okay, so the nerves transport the signal onto the proper part of the brain. Okay? All right, I think that's all I have for you guys.
What? Today?
That's it.
I didn't drive away here for this.
Oh, no?
Jesse, you do not live far from here.
I know.
Okay, you can stick around.
So nothing else